The name is Bond. James Bond. Hi, my review today is on the new James Bond movie, Quantum of Solace. Um, and here's a summary of that movie, the plot. Seeking revenge for the death of his love, secret agent James Bond sets out to stop an environmentalist from taking control of a country's water supply. Um, that kind of story to me seems a bit shallow for a James Bond movie. Um, the movie does have some good car chases and action-packed scenes and stuff. There were times in the movie it seemed like it kind of dragged a little bit, but the thing is about the story. I just felt the story was a little shallow. When you think of James Bond, you think of movies where there's a diabolical villain or dictator trying to destroy the world, and James Bond has to try to stop him. The classic example is Moonraker, my favorite James Bond film. In that movie, there was a villain in that movie. Hugo Drex, I believe. Yeah, that's right. Hugo Drex. What he was going to try to do was he wanted to gas Earth, wipe out the population of the planet, and then create a new race out in space, and then repopulate the planet. Then he becomes like some kind of god or something. You don't really see those kind of villains anymore in James Bond films that are a threat to the world. The villain in this movie, Dominic Green, I believe it is, who I guess you could say he's the villain in this movie because he seems to be pretty, he's kind of an evil kind of guy. But there's no threat to Earth. There's no threat to the world. It's just some country's water supply. That's all it's about. And I just really wish that they would go back to those old James Bond films with those kind of villains. And I think Daniel Craig does a magnificent job as James Bond in this film. Roger Moore has always been my favorite Bond. And there has been a lot of good James Bond guys, actors who played James Bond. I thought Sean Connery was good. Roger Moore was good. I thought that Pierce Brosnan was good. But the only James, and even Daniel Craig, but the only James Bond I did not like was Timothy Dalton. I think he seemed too much of a pretty boy to be playing James Bond. He only played in 2 movies. Sean Connery, or Roger Moore. Like Roger Moore's James Bond always seemed like a guy who was cool and calm, no matter how intense or crazy the situation was. He always seemed to be pretty cool and relaxed about it. Pierce Brosnan's James Bond always had a lot of wit, and I remember Sean Connery's James Bond used to be that way too. George Lazenby's seemed more like a Sherlock Holmes type, the way he would talk and his mannerisms and so forth. But I got to tell you, Daniel Craig's James Bond, that guy is a tough guy. He's brutal. He's brutal to people that he deals with. And in this movie, he does go on a killing spree. He kills a lot of people. Not a lot, but he kills a good amount of people in the movie. And but I wish, this movie has good car chases, good action scenes, and so forth. There were moments that did entertain me, but not entirely. It would be my hope, though, that I wish they would go back to the old ways. When they did James Bond films. I think it's because the world has changed so much since the Cold War. James Bond would sometimes deal with the Soviets, and because back in '89 there was a time when back in '89 the Cold War ended, and then they stopped making James Bond films, and then it wasn't until 1995 they started making them again. I guess maybe all that time they were trying to think of something to do or think of some new kind of enemy or whatever in the world. But I give this movie a B minus. It's a good, fair movie, and I liked it. I thought it was okay. Let's put it that way. There were moments in the film I did like it, but it was okay. Not particularly my kind of Bond film. Speaking of villains, one time in Las Vegas, I met the guy. It was Richard Kiel, I think his name is. He played Jaws, in the Moonraker and some other ones too. Um, but the guy with the metal teeth, I met him once there in Vegas at Caesar's Palace once. And he's a pretty cool guy. I mean, big guy too. But anyways, yeah, I'll give this movie a B minus. Like I said, there were some good moments. There were some moments that dragged, but I really think that there needs to be a villain. You know, a diabolical villain that's threatening the world, and and not just some story about a country's water supply. I mean, that kind of bored me to death as far as that goes. But so I give it a B minus in one of these, and that's my review. And everybody take care until the next one. All right. Shaken, but not stirred. Oh, that's more like it.